Apple close to finalizing this deal with Hyundai-Kia to manufacture an Apple-branded autonomous vehicle. That news broken by our Phil LeBeau. Here to talk more about it is Bernstein's Toni Sacconaghi, one of the top-rated analysts on the stock, who's been watching this notion, Tony, for years. Good to have you. Good morning.
Thanks for having me, Carl. Good morning.
I was just looking at a note here. I'm sure you know we have it. From April of 2015, you wrote 5 reasons why we believe Apple may indeed be looking to build a car. And you said it would probably, if it were to happen, would happen in 5 to 7 years, which is right about now.
Yeah, look, press reports came out as early as late 2014 that Apple was assembling a team under the name of Project Titan to examine looking at a car. And I think at the time we believed that that might be a suitable and large market opportunity for Apple. And the fortunes of Project Titan have kind of ebbed and flowed over the last 5 or 6 years. But it does look like Apple is getting more serious and more confident about an ability to potentially deliver a car. But I would caution that many things can change. This is probably still 3 or 4 years away, and Apple's been very close to launching products and services in the past, and then has veered off course. So certainly, I think the probabilities are increasing. Signing a deal with Hyundai-Kia would be a significant potential step, but it's never over until the product's announced, and that's typically only when it's about to be available.
Right. That news is is maybe even harder to break without Apple's confirmation. The reasons you gave back then in 2015, Tony, are large addressable market. They're usually not afraid of entering markets as a second player, or not, rather a second strike player. Expanding capacity in China. Of the reasons you gave back then, which are still valid?
I think for the most part, we view it very similarly. So this is a very large market. The traditional automotive market is $1 trillion market, and Apple's $340 billion in revenue this year. So, and perhaps by 2025 it'll be over $400 billion in revenue. So that's one of the big challenges for Apple, is how do you find really large markets that can help you continue to grow at a desirable rate? And the car market, being $1 trillion market, is an attractive market. Now, I think one of the initial concerns from investors was, the car market's not a very attractive market. It's capital intensive. It doesn't have very good margins. But if you think about the markets that Apple has gone into historically, they fit many of those same criteria. Ultimately, the PC business is a notoriously low-margin business, and Apple has done well with Macs. The handset business is a weak business. So, our contention then and remains is that there is much precedent for Apple to get into competitive markets late and use its design and brand advantages to create something that resonates with consumers. And, certainly that possibility exists with a car.
Tony, I'm curious what the infrastructure could look like as these cars begin to hit the road at some point. I mean, we're talking about autonomous and self-driving vehicles, incredible amount of data that is generated. It requires a lot in terms of storage. It requires a lot in terms of cloud utilization as well. You're starting to see some satellite constellations be built out with self-driving car in capabilities in mind as well. What does that look like for Apple?
Well, look, I think that's one of the biggest questions is, our observation of Apple is it has been, it has a characteristic that we called feature absolute, where they're pretty non-compromising in their design efforts. They wanted to build a phone that had no buttons on it. They succeeded in doing that. And now they don't even want, a touch print on their products. And so, one of the big questions is, will Apple be able to deliver a car that is both all electric and, perhaps more challengingly, fully autonomous? One that, potentially there is no steering wheel. And that would be very Apple-like. That would be consistent with its belief in feature absolutism. Now, the challenge to getting autonomy, especially for edge cases, is still very, very significant. And we know Apple's been doing trials, but at least from the public trial data, they don't have nearly as much road experience. And so the first challenge before we even think about infrastructure is, can Apple ultimately get to a level where it can plausibly have an autonomous car in 3, 4, or 5 years? And that's very much the first challenge. Assuming it can, there's significant data opportunities that follow that. But that's the first question in my mind.
Shepard Smith here. Thanks for watching CNBC on YouTube.